We can't see you.
No, I'm in a place where the reception is not very good, so I'm switching off my camera so I can hear you all.
Okay. Just don't disappear, that's it.
We can't see you.
Lovely to see you all. So I'm in a place where the reception is not very good, so I'm switching off my camera so I can...
Okay. And shall we start actually?
Yes, Gargi, we should start.
Yeah.
Hello.
I call the fourth meeting of the Rotary year 23-24 to order. And let us start the procedure. May we have 1 minute silence, please?
So Gargi, you're on mute.
Yeah. So, okay, can you hear me now? I'm audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, sure. Now, yes, I welcome first the two clubs who are participating with us in this meeting. First is our Colombo Mid-City, with whom we have got a sister club relationship, and also an exchange program is on for last many years. And definitely it dates back to lot of exchange program, lot of funds and lot of memories for us. Okay. And next is, I'll also welcome President Snehanta and his Rotarian group from Colombo Mid-City. Welcome, Snehanta. This is the first joint meeting we are hosting. Yes. I hope you will enjoy it and we will have a better interaction after this, right? Next, I'll welcome President Srinivas Nagesh of Rotary Bangalore South Parade. He is also the first president of the newly formed district 3191. Welcome, Srinivas.
Thank you, Gargi. Good evening to everyone.
Yes, to you and to your team of Rotarians.
Yeah, all have joined.
All have joined you. That's great. Yeah. Great. Now, a warm welcome goes to Faiza Sirajuddin, our speaker for this evening. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us and knowing fully well that, yes, the timeline is much ahead and still you have accepted our invitation, right? Thank you so much. And we are eagerly waiting to hear you. And definitely there will be an interactive session where I hope we can exchange our queries and all.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you once again. Right. I then welcome somebody who's from all the way Silchar, Assam. Dr. Himabrato, Rotarian Himabrato Das. Dr. Das, I don't know whether you have logged in as yet, but a warm welcome to you. And thank you so much for joining us from Silchar, Assam. Next, I very cordially welcome Rotarian Raghu, who's the District Mental Wellness Director. And next 1 year, I'm sure we are going to have quite a few such sessions and exchange of views, etc., to take this forward. Now, to go to the project front, I have got just one announcement to make. That is, we have distributed the notebooks on 24th of July to Karnataka Public School, Horamabu. And the children are very happy with that. And thanks to Shamina, who went all the way to execute this project. Thank you so much, Shamina. Now, may I request Narayan, who's standing up for the club secretary, Suman, who couldn't make it today, she's traveling, to make his announcements, please.
Thanks, Gargi. So in terms of the announcements, in the coming week, we have two birth dates. One is on 31st of July, that is Rotarian Al Fernandez. And followed the very next day on the 1st of August, our own beekeeper, Santosh Venkatappa. No anniversaries in the coming week. And in terms of the committee meetings, we have the youth services meeting, which is being hosted by the director Manjunath, and that is tomorrow evening at Bangalore Club. So yeah, that's the announcements for the week. Over to you, Gargi.
Thank you. Now, may I request President Shanta of Colombo Mid-City to make his announcements, please. Shanta, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Gargi. Thank you very much.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of announcements. Yesterday, we went to a rural village in Sri Lanka, in a rural district called Polonnaru, and we distributed 40 packs of essentials for expectant mothers, consisting of blankets and a few other things that expectant mothers will need. We also visited two preschools that we found out required a lot of refurbishment and a few other things that the kids needed. And we also visited a village that required a lot of sanitation and clean water. So which we'll be working on in the future. Next Friday is also my installation. So those are the two announcements on my end. Secretary's announcements, can I hand it over to the secretary?
Yeah, please. And anyway, congratulations for your installation.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
And I'll over.
Good evening, Rotarians. Thank you, Rotarian Shahanta. Yes, as for announcements, I think Rotarian Shahanta mentioned that yesterday we gave 40 mother and baby kits to a rural village in Polonnaru. And our next announcement, that is the installation of President Shahanta on the 4th of August at Cinnamon Lakeside. And the theme for that would be Ripple of Hope, where we are looking to raise funds to provide clean water and sanitation for rural villages in the North Central province. That's it. I think I hand it over to Rotarian Shahanta.
So one more announcement, Gargi. Sorry, I missed that. We had Rotarian Ari's birthday on the 24th of July.
Oh.
The young man is on the chat.
Yes. Many happy returns of the day, Ari, well in advance. Okay. I wish we could be there to celebrate your birthday. That's all from your side?
Yes, that's all from
Okay, fine. May I invite Rotary Bangalore South Parade President Srinivas Nagesh to make his announcements, please.
Yeah, good evening to everyone. We started our July Rotary year by way of blood donation camp with around 170 blood donation collected. And then we did our eye screening camp with around 1,000 plus. Around 1,000 plus eye screening happened. Around 50 spectacles were given. And then we had a 1 lakh sampling unit for planting of various coconut trees called Kalpavruksha. It's an ongoing basis, and we had our first speaker meet addressed by Speaker Ashwath, which was like a roaring hit. And my installation is coming on Saturday, 29th, day after tomorrow. So request all of you to grace the occasion. These are my announcements. Thank you.
Is your secretary going to make any announcement, please?
Secretary is on the way. You should be able to log in.
Okay, right. Okay,
Thank
no
you.
problem. So can we move to the main program, guys? Narayan, are you ready? Yeah, fine. I'll now request Anit, Rohit, Venkatesh to introduce the speaker, Faiza Sirajuddin. Rohit?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Rohit.
So it's really, really nice to see so many familiar faces, and it's even nicer to see so many new faces. But an especially warm welcome and a big hi to my friend Fuzzy. All right. And, soon she's going to be your friends as well. Okay. So how many of us are lucky enough to have these aha moments in our lives? I think we can count them. So the time when I had my aha moment is when I heard this, right? If machines are getting better at being machines and robots are getting better at being robots, then we humans need to start getting better at being human. Okay, it's the logic of that just landed on me like a lightning bolt. And it was then I decided that, come what may, Fuzzy and Sunitha Venkatraman's brainchild, Crackerjack, must live on the pages of the banner. I was lucky enough to be the guest editor for the banner last May and this May. And I was very sure then that Crackerjack would always have a place to live, as long as I had a say in the banner. And I think, just to put it very, very simply, Sunitha and Fuzzy together have encapsulated the decades-old debate about what the curriculum framework should be, and what is required by the different schools and colleges, and where is education going, and these big existential questions, down to one single word: fun. Right? And it is just about, how can things be fun? And, which brings us to the subject and the topic of today's meeting and today's talk, which is mental health for the youth. What are we missing? And it goes back to that one-word strategy of, where is the fun in everything? And what's even more is that Fuzzy, has just used her 25 years of teaching experience, as well as, her experience of designing the framework of Singapore's youth program, and these are qualifications that, make us all very lucky that she is on our screens today, and me especially, because I'm very much involved in the realm of youth mental health. But, in the entire concept of mental health is getting a lot of attention now, both good and bad, but the way Fuzzy has really put it into action, rather than just talk, is in every word, fun, in the process of it, in the magnification of it, and in the overall conversation starterism of it all. Okay, it all comes down to that one word. So with that, I will hand over the baton of fun to the person who knows it best when it comes to the realm of mental, of mental health for the youth. Fuzzy, please take it away.
Thank you so much, Rohit. Just give me a second and I'll share my screen But before that, I just want to say that, every once in a while you meet someone and there's just a connection and you were meant to meet and be friends. And I think Rohit and me are very lucky to have made that connection. And we've only met each other in person once and had the most amazing evening. But I think now we will have a lifelong bond and a lifelong friendship. So Rohit, I couldn't have asked for a better person to make the introduction, but I feel great pressure now to make the next 25 minutes of everybody's life as fun as possible. And I shall most definitely try my best. So thank you again for all three Rotary Clubs and for inviting me to this and letting me share a little bit about what I know about youth mental well-being. A very brief introduction about myself, although I think Rohit definitely did me more justice than I deserve. I have been an educator for over 25 years. And towards the last few years of my career in schools, I also went into the space of being the youth mental well-being officer for the students in the high school that I was teaching, as well as becoming a member of Singapore's Youth Mental Wellbeing Network. Because Singapore, like the rest of the world, is really struggling with the issue of young people now struggling in coping with life. And for us adults, especially the adults who deal with young people, to work on a completely different strategy in dealing with that. So that's a little bit about myself. In the last couple of years, I felt such an urgent need in this particular space that together with a very good friend of mine, Sunita, I actually left the job and career I was doing for 25 years working in a school to concentrate full time in helping young people develop the skills that they need to be able to deal with the complexities of life. Please stop me at any time if anybody has any questions, even though we'll have a Q&A at the end. Also, because I know sometimes I speak a little fast, so if anybody needs to stop me to clarify, please do. But let's start with a simple question. What is youth mental well-being? It is something that's entered a lot of conversations lately, especially post-pandemic. And the term is bandied around quite frequently, but I wonder if people know exactly what it means. And we talk about, areas like emotional well-being, psychological well-being, social well-being, but what does it really mean all put together? And I think the idea is for young people, as Rohit says, to be able to enjoy life and to be happy. It's really that simple. But what does it mean to be able to enjoy life and to be happy? I think it's feeling that they are able to handle the complexities of life, that they have made real human connections with other people, that they have a place in this world, that they belong, and and that there's a sense of purpose, that they're here for a reason and they're meant to do something better with their lives, which, happiness and fun sound simple, but when we break it down to those areas, it's really quite a challenge, and it's a lot to expect of young people, and they're feeling less and less able to do that in today's world. So then the next question becomes, how big of a problem is it that it's entered this everyday parlance, right? That schools everywhere around the world are now talking about this. Most schools now have employed school counselors. What has caused this change of culture? And the World Health Organization has put together these statistics. So at least 1 in 7 teens, this is a global statistic, have said that they have experienced mental well-being issues of some form or the other. And when we talk about youth, as in people from the ages of about 12 to 30, 13% of all youth, 13% of all disease that is that has been, I suppose, compiled by the WHO falls under well-being issues. So that's quite a significant number. Yeah? And suicide is the 4th leading cause of death amongst young people, which is huge. 4th leading cause of death, and a lot of it goes unreported, and a lot of it goes, something that there's a sense of taboo around it, so people don't talk about it. And I don't think many people are aware of the high instance of suicide of young people around the world. So my question to all of you then is, why now? Why is this something that has suddenly popped up in the last couple of years, and why are we talking about youth mental well-being? One reason could be, or one reason seems to be, that it's just that we have more awareness. and there is more conversation. The taboo is being lifted. I think young people have more confidence talking about their emotions, right? I think we grew up very much in a culture in which we kept our struggles to ourselves. It was not socially acceptable whenever you were upset or you were sad or you're anxious to share that. You solved your problems yourself. But now young people talk about it. And the more they talk about it, the more awareness is raised. But is that the only reason? Is it more simply because there's more awareness, but the actual instance or the number of people who are suffering in terms of percentage is the same? And I think the general sense is that's not true. It is rising and it's increasing, and it's the reason for that is the perfect storm of everything that's happening in our world today. Now, the first, of course, is social media. Social media has done a lot of good in the world. It's helped me reconnect with people I've lost touch with 20, 25 years ago when I was in school. It's a great way to share information. It's a great way to stay connected. But for young people, it's also increased the amount of attention that is focused on them and the amount they see of what's happening in the lives of other people. And because of social media, there is a lot of pressure, and there is a lot of expectations of how they have to present themselves to the rest of the world, which is something that young people didn't experience in a pre-social media world. And of course, on top of that there's a deluge of information that they suddenly have to take in, not all of which is healthy and not all of which is true. And they don't have the ability to necessarily filter between all of that. So it really is messing with their mental well-being. But more than that, there's also a huge confluence of dystopias. Now, if you guys like me are fans of dystopian fiction, you'll know that across the decades, what we viewed as being dystopian has changed. In the 80s, there was a lot of talk about climate change, and the earth would destroy itself in the next couple of years, and it will no longer be able to house life. And then we moved on in the 90s to all the corporations and the big conglomerations are going to take over, and the 1% will rule all of us. And then in the 90s, there was worry about clean water and would there be enough food, and will the animal species die out? And then there was talk of the bees. So all these various dystopias that at one point were just interesting topics for fiction in books and movies are now coming true. And young people today are seeing this. I think when I was a teenager, there was great confidence that the adults in my life would solve the problem of the world. And I would leave school and I would join the world. And there were people who were smarter than me and people who were older than me that would fix the problems of the world. But young people today don't have that confidence. This confluence of dystopias, whether it's global warming, whether it's pandemics, the rise of pandemics, whether it's the fact that we're going to run out of food, perhaps, and so many other dystopias are problems that they feel they are expected to solve, and they don't feel equipped to do that, and they don't trust the adults in their life to do it. So put all of that together, is a huge increase of expectations. And they don't have that joy anymore of, in 50 or 60 years, when I become one of the big players, only then I have to worry about it. They see themselves entering a world in which there are more problems than there is joy to look out for. And the adults in their life don't always give them credit for this. We scoff at them. We tell them they're worrying unnecessarily, and this doesn't help. It reduces their trust in us when we make such comments. And last of all is their own mental well-being skills have decreased. And whose fault is that? Unfortunately, a lot of that fault is ours. And it's not anything we did intentionally. I think when we have young people in our lives, whether they are students, whether they are children, we want their lives to be as comfortable as possible. Our instinct is to make sure that they have to face as little difficulties as possible. But as we present them with that comfortable life, what we've done is deprive them of any problem-solving ability, because they're living in a world in which the adults in their life are solving all their problems for them. That's even worse in Singapore, in a first world country, in the first world, where even in a larger social space, they don't have any problems to solve. They don't see poverty around them. They don't see any form of struggles around them. So they don't know, or they're never given instances or chances to solve complexities. everything is solved for them, whether it's their parents, and it's instinctive. We think we're doing them a favor as parents, as educators, as policy makers, by making their lives easy. That is what our instinct is telling us to do. But the irony is, the easier we make their lives, the more we're putting them in a position to not be able to deal with the struggles and complexities of life. We've made them soft. So all of these factors put together have really created the perfect storm of a generation of people who feel that there is so much to solve and yet feel completely unable to solve it. And all of this put together has created a social structural problem of an increased problem of reduced mental well-being amongst our young people. And that's why today it's the topic of conversation. So having been a mental well-being officer, having been an educator, one of the first things I've had to learn is how do you recognize it? Now, if you go to any website, and these are all things I've gotten from most websites that deal with young people and their mental well-being, is to look out for changes in behavior. You know, are they less talkative than they used to be? Have they become more withdrawn? Or to see if, you know, things that they used to be good at or things that they were interested in, they've now lost interest at, whether it's the academics or their other hobbies. But the problem with that is that could be just a symptom of puberty. You know, as they move or transition from childhood to teenhood, a lot of these changes are natural anyway. So we don't know how to tell the difference between someone who's just transitioning into a different phase of life to someone who's genuinely struggling with life. And the one thing if you've dealt with teenagers as a parent or as an educator or as a friend, is sometimes it's not always easy to get them to share what it is they're feeling. So are they really struggling with something? It's not something they can express. And it's not because they're being difficult. Sometimes it's because they think they're being cool. But the fact is, a basic understanding of child psychology will tell you that their brains are not functioned that way. They've not developed psychologically yet to be able to express themselves in that way, to be able to think about long-term consequences, to be able to think about the difference between destructive behavior versus constructive behavior. Until they hit their early 30s, sometimes even later, these are not things the human brain for young people is ready to deal with. So we don't know the reason their behaviors has changed as to whether that's perfectly natural and we should let them, or whether there's something they're really struggling with and we should help them. And we don't necessarily know how to have that conversation with them to find out. So that really becomes the struggle of people who work with the youth and the teens and the young people today, to get a sense of whether they are struggling or not. And most importantly is to not conflate. What do I mean by not conflate? Let me introduce you to 3 young people. Of course, I've changed their names completely, but these are young people that I've encountered in my years of education and being a well-being officer. So Lara, the first girl, this is how she expresses her life. Sorry, it's not Zara, it's Lara. She feels life is a tumultuous journey. Her mind is a labyrinth of darkness, and she feels that every day is a battle. But then I introduce you to Tara. Now, Tara feels that, you know, her heart is yearning for a connection as she's going through this journey of self-discovery. And then at the end, we have Sarah. And Sarah, you know, there's certain obstacles that have come by her way, and she's struggling to deal with them. Now, all these 3 kids, all these 3 young girls, they are struggling. You would say that they're in a space of having a mental well-being issue, but are they the same? You know, and if you look at it, they're completely different. So Lara, she belongs to a group of kids or a group of young people who have neurological and psychological struggles. I apologize for the typo there. Tara belongs in group 2 of someone who's having social and emotional struggles. And Sarah belongs to group 3 of someone who's having contextual struggles. Let me explain that in turn, and I'll go through them pretty quickly until I get to group 3, because that's the majority of the world. So group 1 are people with genuine neurological and psychological struggles. And these manifest in things like genuine disorders like bipolar or schizophrenia or Asperger's or being on the spectrum. Now, this is a very small percentage of the world, who and of teens who struggle with this. And this is not something that we can help them with. This requires professional intervention. Yeah, it might be medication, or it might be something as simple as giving them regular therapy sessions. But they do need help. This is not a time of giving them space, or they will put their socks off. They will put their socks up. It is a genuine medical condition that does require intervention, and it requires diagnosis. The good news is it is a small percentage of the population. But should you recognize a child who's in that space, then do get them the help they need. Now, the increasing number that's happening in the last couple of years are kids with social and emotional struggles. Once again, this constitutes maybe 10 to 15% of the population, but it is increasing in this world that we're living in. So we do have to watch out for this space. And these group of kids, now what they manifest is things like depression. They have a sense of, they lack self-worth. They don't feel that they're valuable in the world. They're not contributing. The world is better off without them. And they have some struggles with anxiety. Maybe they're struggling with school. They find it too hard. They're experiencing more failure, and the failures, and it all leads into each other, right? The anxieties lead to depression, leads to insecurities, and so on and so forth. Now, these kids are very much they definitely do need some form of intervention, and they need some form of help, but it doesn't go into the space of needing medication or need some form of professional therapy. It would be good if they have school counselors to talk to, or any good adult in their life, or any good role model, who could be a friend, who helps them through their struggles until they develop a sense of self-confidence, right? So I've encountered so many kids like this in school, and these would always be kids who for some reason or the other are not doing well academically, or they're struggling to make friends. They don't feel, they're a little bit shyer, and then they don't feel they have a powerful enough social circle. And unfortunately, sometimes they become the victims of bullying. The problem with some teenagers is they haven't realized yet the negative effects of bullying, and they don't even realize that they're being bullies. They think it's cool to make fun of their classmates, right? And these kids come back from school and they feel ashamed to tell their parents or to tell their teachers that they are the victims in the class, or the ones who are being bullied, and stuff like that. So these kids, they're not necessarily suffering from a medical condition, but they're the ones that do need proper real help as well. And what needs to be raised is their own self-awareness and their own social awareness, right? What is it? What are your trigger points? What puts you in the position for you to have these anxiety attacks? What leads you to fall into these fits of depression? Social awareness in terms of how are you affecting other people? If your classmates or your social circle is responding this way to you, largely it's their fault, right? They're being mean and they're being bullies and so on and so forth. But there must be something in your behavior that's causing them to react this way. And how do we gently tell kids like this that they have to work on their own social integration and their relationship management, and how they can integrate themselves into their social circles? So it does require a lot of adult supervision, or the supervision of someone who is able to gently lead them into a space of better well-being. And the best way, I think, in which we can help kids like that is to provide them safe spaces, to give them someone to talk to for them to know that they're not alone, and there's always someone that they can talk to, and someone they can listen to, and someone who will understand them. It's a tough role to do. We don't always have the language, and sometimes when we use the wrong words, unfortunately, we push them deeper into a space of them feeling or believing their self-worth to be even less than where they started out. So how do you both build up someone's worth, yet at the same time give them that confidence and the ability to deal with the world themselves? How do you throw them the life jacket, yet at the same time teach them to swim on their own? It is difficult to grapple with, and it's understanding each individual child, getting to know them, figuring out their trigger points, and so on. Again, the good news is, while this is increasing, it's still about 10 to 15% of the population. And as long as we deal with them with empathy, as long as we find connections for them, as long as we find a way for them to integrate with the people around them and make them feel, give them a scaffold and make them feel that there are people in their lives who love them, who care for them, and there's someone to talk to, hopefully they'll be okay. And it is just the growing pains of puberty and teenagehood, and they will develop the confidence eventually to deal with life. But the last group are those with contextual struggles. And these are by and large the majority of the population of young people who declare or state that they're struggling with their mental well-being issues. It's the vast majority. And unfortunately, they can't see the difference. Or a lot of people around them can't see the difference. When a young person comes up to you and says, oh, I'm depressed or I'm anxious, immediately we put them in group 2. Or this person is struggling with their emotions, struggling with their problems. Or worse still, we put them in group 3 and say, oh, let me get you a therapist. Let me get you some form of medical intervention. But actually, this person is just having a contextual problem. So what do I mean by a contextual problem? And a contextual problem could be anything, right? Something has happened in that specific moment of their life that they are not feeling able to deal with. It could be anything, right? It could be they failed in a particular subject or did more badly in that subject than they expected to, or they had a fight with their friend, or they had a fight with their parent. Sometimes it's romantic relationships, they've broken up with somebody. That's the most difficult to talk about with parents, especially with parents whom they feel they can't share, the very fact that they were in a romantic relationship in the first place. And especially in our Asian context, I have dealt with many young people whose parents have huge issues with the fact that they are in romantic relationships. So therefore, when they're struggling with that, their parents are no longer the safe space and the person that they can have this conversation with. And that pushes them deeper into their depression or deeper into their inability to deal with the particular contextual struggle. So that context could be anything. And in fairness, as adults, we have the same thing, right? Sometimes we are disappointed. Sometimes we are heartbroken. Sometimes we are upset because of specific events that have happened in our lives. It doesn't mean that we have a mental well-being issue. It just means at the moment we're having a mental well-being struggle. And it's the same with young people, and it's very important not to conflate them. And for this group of young people, who are the vast majority, is to understand the context and to figure out how to help them through that context. And I go back to the point I made earlier, which is unfortunately, a lot of teenagers today are not equipped to deal with a lot of things that we felt we could have, because their mental well-being skills, because they are so much in a world in which all their problems are solved for them, and so much of their their day-to-day, the complexities and struggles of day-to-day life are not something they have to worry about, right? We try to make their lives easier for them. So when these contexts or these moments happen, they realize they completely don't have the ability to deal with failure or disappointment, whether it's academic or social or romantic or global, etc., right? They've completely lost those skills and they don't know how to deal with this. Now, this is the group that we can most help. Yeah, this is the group, the most significant group, and the ones that we can make the most difference in their lives, right? And what we have to do is equip them with the mental well-being skills or human skills. And as Rohit mentioned, the best way to do it is in an environment that is fun for them, to create those safe spaces for them. Now, to be clear, let me explain what these human skills are. This is something that I think is the new space of education. I grew up very much in a world where school was about providing us with content or with knowledge. But there is a growing recognition that content and knowledge is available everywhere now. It's available in all our pockets, in all the devices that we have, thanks to Google and Wikipedia. Content and knowledge is just, it's accessible. The person with the most value is no longer the person who's most knowledgeable. The person with the most value in today's world is the person who's most skilled. The irony is that our kids are being less and less skilled in our pursuit and giving them more and more knowledge, which is what they need less and less. It's a really ironic position that education seems to be in today. And the 5 human skills that have been identified by thought leaders around the world that young people do need to work on are their ability to problem solve, to interact with others, to have a global perspective, or to have a complex understanding of the world around them, to have resilience and grit to deal with the obstacles and struggles that life throws at them. And most importantly, by far, is the ability to have impact. Now, what they really struggle with is a sense of helplessness. They see the world that they're going out in, they see the problems that the world has, in every respect, not just global, but like I said, even professional or social, whether we're talking about AI or whether we're talking about global warming, all of these things, but they don't feel they can do anything about it. They don't, there's a huge sense of helplessness. And every young person I've taught who goes off into university and who comes back to visit, I feel very privileged that a lot of the kids I teach who go off to university come back and visit me. And they all have the same story, no matter what field they've gone off to work into, is that nothing they've learned in school helps them deal with life. This is just a common problem across socioeconomic spectrums, across, the subject matter that they've studied in school. They just don't feel that they can deal with the struggles of life. They don't feel they have any power. They feel very, very helpless. So what we really want to help kids work on when we talk about helping them with their mental well-being is for them to have a sense of impact. That, hey, you can do something to change your situation. You don't have to be a victim. You don't have to be a recipient of everything that life throws at you without being able to make a change, even if it's a small one. Not all changes have to be world-changing. Changes just have to have a small impact in your life at the moment, even if they don't change your whole life. But if they change your moment, then that's good enough. And those are the skills that I'm really trying to work with young people today. And there's this huge gap in their ability to, I think, deal with the complexities of life, because this is the area in which they feel that they're struggling with. Do I have the skills that so many of us take for granted, that we've developed over the years because of our life experiences? But because of their limited life experiences, they don't feel they have developed these skills, and yet they don't have the safety blanket of going off into a world that's pretty much taken care of by the adults out there to slowly develop it in their 20s and 30s. They feel they have to have it the moment they leave school. So how do we help? Which is the most important question. Now, what I tell the parents that I've worked with over the years is, it goes against every instinct and every fiber of our nature, but we have to complicate their lives. Don't solve their problems for them. If they have a problem within reason, of course, nothing reversible, nothing irreversible, nothing that's going to cause them damage, nothing that's going to get them landed up in hospital, or worse still, in jail or anything like that. But if it is a problem that isn't going to, have irreversible damage, they have to figure out a way to solve it themselves. We can be a support system. We don't give them answers. And let them come to us with answers, and sometimes be the one who provides them those problems. Really complicate their lives. It doesn't have to be real. It can be in the context of the TV shows that that we watch with them, or the books that we read with them, to kind of get them to answer those questions. Or, hey, if you were in that situation, what would you do? And make it a conversation that we have with them, but really complicate their lives in the process of providing them a safety net. And most importantly is to develop their off-screen time. Now, I'm not one of those who thinks that being on screen is bad. I don't think you can work with young people today and then just say that all screen time is bad. Unfortunately, this is life today, and this is their life. They are going to be on TikTok, and they are going to be on Instagram, and they are going to be on Steam playing various video games that a lot of us probably won't even understand, never mind be able to see the appeal of, because it is a completely different world with a completely different mindset. And we can't tell them that all of this is bad and get off it. In fact, part of our responsibility is to learn that world and to share that world with them. But add to that, we have to enrich their off-screen time as well. We can't tell them to get offline and get off their screen without providing them an off-screen alternative that is equally entertaining and something that is equally nurturing for them. My solution to this, I have one and it's my favorite and I've used it to great success, is board games. You know, we really have to reintroduce the board game culture, and the skills that we learn while playing board games is just invaluable. You know, the human interaction, the fun that we have with our peers in a game of Monopoly or in a game of backgammon or chess, the strategies that we develop, the tactics that we develop. It's so subtle, but so much is lost in when we've stopped playing intergenerational games and we've stopped playing games with our kids, and we assume that, okay, you know, they're having their entertainment with their friends in their on-screen time. But let's find a way to bring back family time through playing games. And the best solution I can provide for that is board games. I've done that with my nieces and my nephews, and it's been such an amazing solution to make them, you know, we talk about connecting with teenagers, but an amazing way to connect, but an amazing way to get them to work on these skills that we've been talking about as well. So these are some of the things that we can do at home. We can also, as parents, I mean, we're busy ourselves. There's so much we have to do. And their world is not only with us. So what can we do outside the home or beyond the home is to provide them opportunities to be independent. And a lot of that includes travel. Kids today are very fortunate. There's so many global events for young people that schools send them to or that parents can send them to. And it's not to attend the event per se. I mean, each event has value, and going to that event in itself will have value, but it's simply the opportunity for them to have a chance to be independent and to network and to meet people that they would not normally meet in their social circle. Really helps them feel that they have some control or impact in the world, which helps them tremendously in their sense of being less helpless and therefore in their ability to be more independent. And these events provide them facilitated hardships and also allow for them to meet other people, get feedback from their peers and learn about themselves in a way that we could never provide opportunities for at home. Now, the ultimate solution, of course, is for school systems to change. And I'm very much in the space of campaigning for education to change entirely so that we de-emphasize content in the school curriculum and emphasize skills learning, which, you know, is, I think every thought leader recognizes, but every school is struggling to do. So very much in the space of working with schools and helping them make the transition. But as parents, as community leaders, as thought leaders, this is really a space that is very, very empty. It's very barren. There are very few people who even understand what kind of, you know, people might say, yes, we recognize education needs to change, but don't really know what that is. And, you know, if it's something that you're interested in, you know, happy to have anybody on board to work on this area and to talk about what it is that the school system needs to change to help young people with. And part of it is equipping teachers so that they become the right role models for kids, not in terms of what they know, but how they deal with the struggles and complexities of life. And as long as this is still missing, which by and large it is missing in schools across India, in Singapore, and I would say globally, which is why it is a global problem, is this huge change in the curriculum and the education system, which as an educator myself, I will tell you, has not changed since the 1970s. We see how the world has changed so much even in the last 5 to 10 years, but education is still working with the same functional demands that was equipping people to work in factories and industry 2.0. It is by no means equipping young people to live in a world in which all our dystopias are confluencing and going to create a real problem. So this is how really that we can help the young people today. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions for me, I'd be more than happy to take them at this point. I think you're on mute, Gary.
Sorry. Before we go to the interactive session, I would request for about 10 minutes extension so that we can continue this session uninterrupted. because I'm sure by 8:30 we will not be able to wrap up and there'll be a lot of questions coming up, right? Okay, so I hope I have the permission to take 10 minutes extra.
Can we stop the screen share if you're going into the question and answer?
Sure. Stop.
Ms. Faiza, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for the wonderful talk, and it was pretty enlightening to a large extent. Now, you are based in Singapore, are you?
Correct.
So how do you see, how do you perceive the situation in India right now? I mean, is it similar to what you spoke about the schooling system?
So thank you. Go ahead. Sorry. Have you finished your question?
So how do you see the situation in India? Because you are based in Singapore, I'm sure you have some connection here and you're getting a lot of feedback. But you mentioned about the schooling system and, you know, a lot of changes to be made. I was quite surprised to hear that, because I thought in places like Singapore that they have better kind of format or more advanced form of learning than the rote learning that happens in India. So please comment on that.
Sure. So a little bit about me. It's very interesting. I did start off my teaching career working in the government schools in Singapore. But the last 10 years or so, I was working in an Indian international school in Singapore, and was very exposed to Indian kids, whom, by the way, I think are magic. Definitely. And also I've been working with a lot of schools in Bombay and Bangalore through the work I've been doing in the last couple of years. So I have some exposure to kids from India across the socioeconomic spectrum, because we've also worked with foundations across in Bangalore and Bombay, as well as Delhi, actually. So with kids with on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum as well. And it's very interesting. So they do have different struggles. So I'll generalize first of young people in general, and then I'll move on to each separate subgroup. So I think because we do have young people today have a much bigger global mindset, because even kids, from villages have some connectivity today, and they do have some exposure, much more than we did. I think our worlds were much more isolated. Growing up as a kid in Singapore, all I knew was Singapore. And if I grew up in a village in India back in the 80s, all I would know is my kind of circle. But today there's a global mindset, which also kind of adds to their mental well-being struggles, because they see what the affluent have that they don't have. What people share on social media are the best aspects of their life, which tend to make us feel even more less than, and people do it so harmlessly. They're sharing on Facebook and Instagram, on Twitter, their holidays or their expensive meals, without realizing how, when the people who don't have opportunities to this see it, it does affect their sense of self-worth. And we do it without any bad intent. And I have tried to explain this to people, but it's very difficult, for people to have that recognition. So to answer your question, the Singapore education system is well lauded. There are parts of it that I'm very proud of, having been a part of it myself for many years. But it shares the same struggles. It is only recently, in the last couple of years, that our education ministry has recognized that we need to move away from content, that we need to move towards skills. And again, the struggles, I think, are the same all over. My understanding, it's the same in Delhi, it's the same in Bombay, that even if the ministries, even if the thought leaders, even if the civil servants know a change has to happen, to filter that down to schools is difficult, because you have a whole process, and the huge bottleneck is teachers. And I've been a teacher myself. Teachers are overworked, they're underappreciated, and they're underpaid, and they're struggling with their own mental well-being issues, right? And they're being told that everything they know is no longer applicable, and they have to relearn how to be a teacher, and nobody's teaching them how to do that. Everybody's talking about helping young people without talking about how to help the educators. It's a huge bottleneck. And one of the first things I learned when I entered this space is you need to work with educators. So that bottleneck is the same world over. And teachers are struggling. What I've learned, surprisingly, and that's kind of helped me with my philosophy, is that the kids I've worked from the lower end of the economic spectrum, the socioeconomic spectrum, their problem-solving abilities are phenomenal. Not to say they're not struggling with life, but their resilience is so much better than the middle-class kids, because they problem solve and they deal with struggles on a daily basis, and they don't let it get to them. Or, it's part and parcel of life. If every struggle I feel is going to put me in a position where I just want to curl up in bed and cry and take the day off, then they'll never leave bed. Whereas the middle class and and above, right? There's a sense of, it's a good thing. I'm not disagreeing with it. Everybody talks about work-life balance, and if you are struggling and if you're having a bad mental health day, then take the day off. I get that. It's not just our physical well-being that sometimes we need to take the day off and work on it. It's also our emotional well-being. But that's the problem, right? Sometimes in trying to give people the space to work on their emotional well-being, we coddle them. How do we draw that line between helping them have the space to, hey, yes, rebuild your resistance, get better, but at the same time not overprotect? So to answer your initial question, yes, in working with the kids from India, I think the struggles are the same. The education systems have different struggles, but by and large it's the same. As long as we are societies that are focused on board exams and results, and making sure our kids do well enough to get into Harvard or Cambridge or Oxford or IIM or IIT, which is the same in Singapore as it is in India, then we're focusing on content and not skills. And as long as we're doing that, then the problem will persist. I hope I've answered your question, sir.
Yeah, of course, certainly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
Yes. You see, it is, I have always observed it. Mostly this happens, this adolescent age, when between 13 to 18 and all. These kids are, most of the time, they don't want to disclose everything. The problem they're going through probably, but they don't want to talk about it. I don't know whether it's a social taboo to talk about it or something like that, but they suffer. And at the same time, they kind of are disoriented. What do you think is the reason? Is this the structure of the society, or it's a parental situation? What is the reason for this kind of behavior?
So
even you ask them something, they don't want to come out.
So by the way, it's all of the above. The first thing, like I said, it's psychological, in the sense that if you talk about child psychology, the brain is not there yet. The brain is not at a place that it can filter, everything is over dramatized. My niece, who is 19 years old from the US, has been staying with me for the last 3 weeks. And everything is drama, even the smallest thing for her is the biggest news. And I think that is true for all young people, So that's one. And it's not their fault. It's the way the human brain works. They can't filter out between a small problem versus a big problem yet. So that's number one. Number two, it is societal and structural. You talk about Indian kids struggling to talk. Let me tell you, it's 100 times worse in Singapore. I started off teaching in the Singapore school system, and when I worked with 15-year-olds, they would not talk to me at all. I'd start a lesson by talking to the wall, and I would talk to the wall for a good 5 to 10 minutes before somebody would raise their hand or would shout out, "Why are you talking to the wall?" And I'd say, "Because the wall is as responsive as you are." I realized when I dealt with Indian kids that I didn't have that problem. They were much more responsive and happy to talk. So if you think that there's a problem with Indian kids, it's much worse with other societies. I actually find, and I've dealt now with American kids, with German kids, with Indonesian kids, with Australian kids. I actually find the Indian kids most willing to talk about what they're going through. And it's actually something I've been trying to sociologically analyze. Why are Indian kids the most willing to share their opinions, to talk about what they're feeling? Whatever that magic formula is, we do need to share it with the rest of the world. But part of it is also Asian values, which makes some things unacceptable. Like I said, romantic relationships is one of them. And it's so much a part of their lives, the girl they like, the boy they like, and all of that. And then they feel they can't talk about it with adults because they'd be met with, disapproval, for example, right? So it's a combination of all, and it's also puberty. It's also just the structural growing changes. I know this is hard to do, but they need to believe that you are the adult in their life who won't judge. And it's so difficult not to be a judging adult because we feel and we strongly believe that our wisdom is what we can provide to them. It's the value that we can offer them, our life experiences, the fact that we've done it before. If you listen to me, your problems will be solved. But to them, that comes across as judgmental, right? It comes across as, so again, it's that balance of how do you present yourself as an adult that isn't going to judge them, that isn't going to jump in and tell them what they've done wrong. They need to feel you're their friend to be able to talk to you. And that's hard to do. It requires practice, and it's something I've been working on for 25 years. Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
My name is TV Mohan. Unfortunately, I'm not able to start my video. I think I have a technical problem.
No problem.
What a wonderful talk. It is absolutely illuminating. Very, very nice to hear the 3 types of problems that you described. Absolutely spot on. I just want to know that you described 3 particular brackets, and the one with which you said about bipolar and schizophrenia. Have you ever had people or young people recovering from these and getting back into normalcy with or without medication?
The answer to that is yes, but it is by and large so it depends on what it is. So I'll split it up into 2. So there are the psychological problems, which are things like bipolar, schizophrenia. I mean, those are very serious, and they are, I don't fully understand the science of it. I'm not a psychologist, nor am I trained psychologist. And if I do encounter kids with that, my first line of defense is to connect them to a child psychologist or a child therapist. There is a medical condition, and you do need a trained medical professional. I have followed up with a few kids, and they are mostly on lifelong medication, but the medication is helpful. It does come with its share of side effects, which is unfortunate. And hopefully, as medical science get better, that will get better in time as well. But most conditions do have some form of medical solution or the other, coupled together with therapy. Those are the more medical psychological ones. Now, for the neurological ones like ADHD, ADD, autism, and Asperger's, a lot of it is social conditioning. And very, very proud of kids that I've worked with over the years who have gotten better without medication. There's just a kid, actually, this lovely young man named Parth, who I just had a conversation with 2 weeks ago. He called me. I worked with him, and he was in grade 8 and 9. He's now in grade 12. And he had gone off medication for over 2 months and was able to control all of his social struggles that he couldn't before when he was off medication. But a lot of it, again, is with the therapy, is learning all these different social cues, of being able to control their own excesses or their own gaps. So it does take a lot of intervention. But yes, there are people who have managed to lead perfectly wholesome, holistic, normal lives if that intervention happens at a formative stage. So these are the areas in which a lot of parents consider taboo, right? Oh no, there's nothing wrong with my child. They don't need professional intervention. They're fine. They'll grow out of it. Again, by trying to protect them, we're doing them a disservice. If that intervention happens at a young age, then actually by the time they need to be independent in their 20s and 30s, that scaffolding is set up for them. And I have seen many live very, very comfortable lives, even if they're in therapy for the rest of their lives. But that's okay. It's just like me with my autoimmune thyroid disease or anybody else, right? You do have to be on medication your whole life, but it does help you function normally in the world.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Most welcome.
Just in interest of time, I will welcome
I
any
think,
questions from
1 minute,
Colombo
Narayan.
City.
Naren, I
just
think Sehanta has a question.
Yep.
Sehanta, will you please
Yes.
go ahead?
Yes. I'm sorry if you covered this before, Faisal. My connection
No
was
worries.
good earlier. So this is just an extension to the point that Gargi made. It's true that kids don't really disclose their issues or problems to adults. But what happens, I believe, is their friends see these problems. Their peers see these problems. So I don't think anyone's expecting children to solve other children's or kids' problems. But is there a process in place where we can empower children or friends to identify their peers' issues and be with them, or be with them as a friend, or help them along the way until those problems are disclosed, or adults get to know these problems? Because I was just thinking of this Netflix TV series that came a few years back called 13 Reasons Why. I'm sure you would have seen it. So a lot of the times, kids are bullies, but also their friends see these problems that other kids go through. So is there a way to empower children to understand and help their friends?
No, absolutely. And it's the first line of defense. You talked about 13 Reasons Why. The other one you should watch is a musical called Dear Evan Hansen, which has been made into a movie which deals with the same issues. Yes, their peers are the first line of defense, absolutely. But young people, I think if there's small issues, then they can help each other. So there are few things that are going on in the world today. Again, as we move into a world in which a lot of interaction happens digitally and on screen, what's suffering or what we're losing is the ability to connect with each other. And the pandemic has had a huge impact on that. Not just the fact that a lot of school has happened online, but just dealing with people in a mask. It's so, it's these small things, right? That with just not being able to see someone's face entirely, only being able to see, it's a disconnect. It prevents us from being able to connect to a human being because we can't even see all of their faces, never mind that we're only connecting with them on screen. So a lot of young people today, aside from having lost 2 to 3 years of their life in terms of social connections, and a lot of places that are still wearing masks, the facial cues and our ability to, all of that is also lost. And they have to pick these things up in their formative years that for us is nothing. The 2 years is over, life has gone back to normal. It's just a story. It's like, oh, I can't believe this happened last year. For them, it's changed the way they'll develop. Their developmental trajectory has changed entirely, and we won't even know the consequence of that for another 10 years or so, and how it will affect the kinds of adults they are. So we need, as the adults in their lives, we need to provide that safe space. That really is the only answer, to feel that we are approachable, that they can come to tell us. A lot of the times, the kids I worked with did not come to me themselves. Another kid would come to me and say, hey, so-and-so, we've noticed this. Sometimes it's physical harm. I've had kids who cut themselves. It's become, something that they do, or they're posting on social media things that are a little bit worrisome. So it's their peers who tell me. And then I get their peers to encourage them to come and talk to me, because if I force them to talk to me, they won't say anything. So the first line of defense, if any young person comes up to you and tells you that they're worried that their friend is behaving in a certain way, get them to be that mediator, to get that friend to come and talk to you, and then slowly take over and be that adult in their life, because the kids can't take on that burden. It's too much of a burden for them to be, and even if then that person who's struggling depends on them, it's too much. Even as an adult, if we have a friend who's always having anxiety attacks, always depressed, it's too much for us to handle. Can you imagine for a young person who has to take on their friend's struggles? So we have to slowly create a culture that makes them only the middleman, but not the person who bears the burden in the long run. Yeah.
Thank you.
Does anyone has any question to ask?
Looking at the chat, I think.
Yeah.
There's nothing on the chat, I think.
Yeah, there's just three.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
I have a last question. Can I?
Sure. I'm good.
Yeah. Faz, yeah, that was a excellent talk. And I had a question. I'm involved in a school, which is an inclusive school. And we take special children. And Rohit is also a part of it. Incidentally, I'm his father.
I guess.
So we are involved in this school, and we find, that the biggest problem that we face is that parents, when we find that some children have a learning disability or some kind of, where the children find it very difficult to cope up. And we tell them to get an assessment done of the child to find out if they have any problem. We find that the parents are not willing to do this. And they feel going to a place and getting an assessment on the child, there is a stigma attached to it that the child has a mental problem. Now, and they are just refusing to take the child to get the assessment. And we have a major problem in convincing the parents to do this, and that affects the child very severely right through. So, do you have any suggestions as to how we could convince these parents to make them understand that they should do this assessment in the interest of their child?
Sure. Let me start off by saying that Rohit speaks very, very highly of you. And the school that you guys work in, and it's a real honor and pleasure to meet you and to be able to talk to you in person. To answer your question, that's a struggle every educator feels. So anybody who works with children who is not the parent of that child, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard it myself, in terms of dealing with parents who don't want to or refuse to recognize that their child needs a certain amount of intervention or a certain way of deal with things. And that goes back to Gargi's question, right? That there is a social stigma or taboo attached to it. And there's so many ways we have to work with that. One, on a larger social, structural, cultural space, we need to change that taboo. And you're in a very fortunate position of being or having an educational institute that you work with. And before you identify, or before any school identifies individual children, we have to, as a school, talk to parents and change that mindset, right? So in the literature that we send out to parents, in the interaction that we have with parents, we have to slowly change that social stigma mindset without them even, it necessarily being their child, right? But when we talk about educating kids, any educator who is in the business of educating kids cannot remove the responsibility of also educating parents.
Right.
And we have to, it's such a big thing, and everybody has to do it as well, right? States, governments, everything, in terms of this change of cultural mindset. But we have to, the other thing is, then if we can't affect the parents, then we just have to keep being that adult for the child. If the parent, whatever, even if it's an academic disability, right? The ones who struggle with learning difficulties or social struggles, or parents who are giving wrong messaging, right? Who are actually being awful role models to the kids or stuff like that. We just have to be that other adult in their lives who is the correct role model, who is giving them the messaging. And unfortunately, kids will struggle with that because they have to juggle between the two adults in their life. But eventually, hopefully they learn. And sometimes I've had kids in their 30s who come back to me and tell me that a lesson I told them when they were 13, that at that time, had no significance to them at all. Suddenly in their early 30s, they remembered something I said, and they only applied it 17 or 18 years later. It is a thankless job because teenagers they take for granted the impact we have on their lives, right? In fact, not only take for granted, they roll their eyes and think it's unnecessary. And a lot of times the impact we have on them, they won't come back and thank us for. We won't even hear about it. But true. You do have an impact and you won't know it. But so many kids in their 30s or 40s, something will trigger. They might not even remember the name of the educator or the adult who told them that, but something will trigger and it will have an effect. So all we can do is be that alternative adult, and hopefully we can work with the parents. And a lot of it is creating that culture where schools now have to involve parents. They can no longer be two separate pillars. But if you can't, and sometimes it is just impossible, then to just be that alternative voice. Yeah, it's the best we can do.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Most welcome. Sushila, I see your question. It's very, it depends on the school. So Sushila's question is, can't we do assessments for all kids so that no child is singled out? Number one, of course we can, but it depends on whether the schools have the resources or not, because these are psychological assessments. They are not something, and if we think of schools as being places where academics happen, not psychological. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's why education needs to change, because schools today are very equipped to provide kids with academic content, but not their psychological well-being. So a lot of schools aren't equipped to do that at the moment, unfortunately. That's one problem. And number two, even if everybody does it, the intervention for the kids that we identify as needing the help is going to be different. So if you don't remove the stigma, people are going to recognize that this child is getting a different intervention anyway. So it won't help the larger problem. I hope that answered the question, by the way. If I've misrecognized or interpreted anything, please let me know.
I think nobody has got any further question. Narayan, is there anything pending in the chat box?
No, nothing else. Yeah, nothing else.
Nothing else. Okay. So can we proceed to the vote of thanks then? Yes, I request now Sudha Thimaiya, who definitely is herself an expert in this domain, to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Gargi. So maybe I'll just introduce myself. I'm a mental health practitioner since 28 to 30 years. I'm a counselor, trainer, supervisor. And a lot of what you have been talking about is what we are endeavoring to do with the government of India. And so I think what you were talking about is very relevant, because the foundation of society is the youth, right? And the other thing I want to really thank you about is to highlight these three categories of, people, I mean, children who might come under the spectrum of actual mental disorders. And I just want to give some information, because someone asked, the very early beginnings of mental disorders start at this very vulnerable age. And it's so important for us to erase the stigma around mental health, because if they are ignored at this age, they can progress into more serious mental health disorders like schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder. All of them, the beginnings of illness start at this age. And therefore, it's so important for us to really erase the stigma and make mental health interventions a more friendly, approachable way, just as we look at. So we always tell someone, just as you have something like diabetes or a heart problem, this is also an area of illness. I also want to say, so therefore medication might be important, but very early intervention can help a person to recover or live a very normal life. My area of interest is high-risk behaviors in young adults. I work a lot with addiction. And, I've been very fortunate to also collaborate with people outside the country. So we are doing a lot of work on what you very importantly talked about is psychoeducation. And I think that's what Rohit was also talking about, bringing in, psychoeducation into school. And when you talked about stories, I remember we used to be talked about moral science. We were given moral science stories. And in many ways that did impact us and, retained maybe our value systems and by and large gave us a sense of security and support. So I think what Faiza is talking about today, thank you very much, is the coming together of society, the parent, the education system, maybe the governments, the policy makers. It's very critical that we come in because these are the foundation of society. And if these things are tapped at a very early age, there will be so much of progress on mental and psychological well-being. So I would really like to thank you for this very informative talk that you gave us. We are also working in Tamil Nadu. We are working on a model system on mental health. We are tapping schools over there. And we are going to bring this into the awareness of the government to introduce more of these models in different parts of the country. So if we would be very interested in connecting with you, and I will certainly keep that in mind. So I just want to say that was one reason I agreed to give the vote of thanks, because this is very close to my heart. And thank you so much. It was lovely to have heard your talk today and the interest of the audience and, their interest in really understanding what mental health is, where is it a serious issue, where is it we can help as a society, as parents, as family. Thank you so much and thank you, Rohit, for, bringing in this very interesting speaker. Yeah, thank you. So thank you, everyone. And yeah.
Thank you, Sudha. And thanks all of you on behalf of our CBC team. I thank all the participants from Colombo Mid-City and also South Parade. I hope all of us have learned something from Faiza's speech, and there's a huge takeaway from it. Thank you all for participating to make this meeting a really worthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you, everyone. Bye.